My wife, Kelly, thought I didn't know about her plan. She either thought I was too dumb or too naive to notice her affair with her coworker Tom. She believed I would ignore it and let her keep seeing him. But she was in for a surprise. I had been suspicious for a while. The signs were obvious. She had late nights at work, suddenly wanted a new wardrobe, mood swings, and she felt distant from the things we used to enjoy together. Whenever I tried to talk about it, she acted like nothing was wrong. Kelly always denied anything was happening and said I was just insecure and jealous. Since my job kept me busy, I eventually hired a private investigator. I wasn't going to stay in the dark. From the start of our relationship and throughout our 10 years of marriage, I made it clear that I wouldn't tolerate cheating. So, with a knot in my stomach, I went to see Jake Sullivan, the investigator, to hear his report. At first, I was relieved when he told me that Kelly hadn't crossed that line yet. But my relief disappeared when he added, "For now." It turned out that my wife was definitely having an affair, but it hadn't become physical yet. Jake warned me it was only a matter of time. Kelly and Tom had started calling each other work spouses. I hated that phrase. She had one spouse, and that was me. While some might see it as harmless or cute, to me, it felt like she was already in an emotional affair. Turns out, I wasn't wrong. Jake's report showed that Kelly and Tom had lunch together every single day, just the two of them. They'd sit close, hold hands, and sometimes even share a kiss. I saw photos of it all, and I swear, I wanted to throttle that smug bastard Tom. On top of the lunches, they were conveniently working late together, even though there was no real reason for it. It was as if they were avoiding their real lives, draining every extra minute they could from the day. Jake also managed to track down Kelly's emails and texts. I knew it was illegal and that I couldn't use it in court if things came to that. Divorce for infidelity is tricky in our state. No-fault divorces are easier and don't need any proof. Still, I needed this for my peace of mind. Sullivan wouldn't show me the actual messages or let me read them. He just summarized what they said. He assured me that Kelly never spoke badly about me, even when Tom tried to. Kelly wouldn't let him say anything against me. I guess in a strange way, that was a small relief. Their emails and texts confirmed their relationship had gotten personal, though neither of them had said, "I love you." The conversations were intimate, almost drifting into sexting territory. Tom had even sent her pictures of his body, which Kelly happily returned with some topless shots of her own. Thankfully, she hadn't sent anything too explicit, at least not yet. Trying to wrap my head around everything, Sullivan dropped the worst news yet. Tom's wife was heading out of town for a few days to visit her mother, and Kelly and Tom were planning to use that time to take things to the next level. The only thing in their way? Me. They weren't sure how they could pull off a night together if I was still around. Since I wasn't planning on leaving town, they had to get creative. One idea was to tell me Kelly was going on but Kelly didn't want to risk me finding out by checking in with her friends, so they scrapped that plan. Another thought they had was trying to convince me to leave town. Looking back, I remembered Kelly casually suggesting I take a golf trip with my buddies, an offer I turned down without a second thought. In the end, they chose a bold but straightforward approach: honesty. Tom figured I was already on track to being the kind of guy who would turn a blind eye to my wife's affair, just to keep her happy and close. He actually convinced Kelly that sleeping with him would somehow improve our sex life and strengthen our relationship. He told her that all she had to do was lay it out for me, and I'd reluctantly agree to let it happen. Clearly, Tom didn't realize just how strong-willed I am. What really shocked me, though, was that Kelly fell for his manipulative story. She should have known better, known that I'd never stand for this. If she didn't see that, I started to wonder if she wasn't thinking clearly. Sullivan told me that was all he had for now, so I took the report and went home. I asked him to keep an eye on Kelly's messages and let me know if anything new came up. By Friday, Sullivan called with an update. Kelly was planning to meet me after work on Monday. She wanted to confess her plans for Friday night: a romantic date with Tom, dinner, dancing, and then spending the night together at a hotel. The plan was for her to come back home on Saturday or maybe Sunday, depending on how things went. Kelly and Tom had even practiced what she would say, convincing themselves that I would just go along with it. They thought I would be upset at first, but Kelly planned to calm me down, promising it was just a one-time thing, even though they both knew that wasn't true. She even suggested we could be intimate afterward, as if I'd be thrilled to take her back after she'd been with Tom. How thoughtful of them, considering my needs like that. With only a couple of days to get ready for this so-called intervention, as they jokingly called it, I was determined to turn the tables. Over the weekend, I spent a lot of time thinking, wondering if my marriage with Kelly was even worth saving. As I worked through my emotions, a plan naturally started to form in my mind. I knew I had to confront this head-on and put an end to it once and for all. In the beginning, when we first got married, Kelly and I were inseparable. We shared everything, our time, our dreams, our lives. She was my best friend and, without a doubt, my best lover. All of that faded. Maybe that's just how things go. Maybe nothing is meant to last forever. I guess I'd always held on to this old-fashioned, idealized notion of marriage, two people sticking together, facing whatever life throws at them as a team. Having gone through failed marriages before Kelly, I couldn't help but wonder if the issue was us or if the whole idea of marriage was flawed. How can anyone expect to keep the same feelings, desires, and interests when life has a way of changing everything around us? In this fast-paced world of social media and instant gratification, maybe marriage, like dinosaurs and DVDs, was becoming a thing of the past. I briefly considered letting Kelly be with Tom, but I quickly threw that idea out. There was no way I was going to let him claim any rights over my wife. I was gearing up for a fight. Then on Monday, just after lunch, Kelly called. "Hey, Kelly," I said, noticing she hadn't been calling me much during work hours lately. This worried me, so I asked if everything was okay. She replied with, "Hi, honey," and I couldn't help but wonder if she used that same tone with Tom. I pushed that thought aside and casually asked if she'd be home on time tonight, since she said she had something important to discuss. She said she'd be home around 5:15, and I mentioned that I also had something important to tell her. Her silence on the other end showed she was curious. When she asked what my big news was, I said I'd rather wait to share it in person. I then said I needed to finish a monthly report and ended the call. After that, I asked my boss for the rest of the day off, and he didn't mind at all. Later that evening, as I sat at the kitchen table, I felt nervous but tried to stay calm. The garage door creaked open at 5:27, and even though I was a mess of emotions inside, I kept my face calm. I had a chilled bottle of Sauvignon Blanc and 2 glasses ready. When Kelly walked in and tossed her keys and purse on the table, I felt a wave of relief. Thankfully, Tom wasn't with her, which would have made things more complicated. I greeted her with a smile. "Hey, sweetheart," I said warmly, copying the way she had spoken earlier. I asked if she wanted some time to settle in before we talked or if she preferred to get right to it. My eagerness to dive in caught her off guard. I could tell she wasn't expecting me to be so ready to talk. That was part of my plan, to keep her guessing and make sure I stayed in control of the situation. Kelly admitted she hadn't thought I'd be waiting like this. But after a moment's hesitation, she agreed it would be best to get it over with. She sat down at the table with me. I suggested that I share my news first, asking if she had any issues with that. She seemed unsure but gave a hesitant nod, saying it was fine. Without waiting for more of a response, I poured us both a glass of wine. She took it and downed half of hers before I refilled it. I started by telling her that I've been doing a lot of thinking. I promised I wouldn't drag things out. I paused, letting the silence hang heavy between us, watching as she leaned in, her eyes locked on me. "Curious," Kelly asked, "what's going on?" "I want a divorce," I said, laying it out there with no sugarcoating. I let the words sink in, giving her a moment to process. At first, she looked confused, like she couldn't quite understand what I just said. But then it hit her, and the shock spread across her face. I saw the flicker of fear, maybe even panic, before it shifted to surprise, probably because she was worried I knew about her and Tom. When she asked why, I told her honestly that my feelings had changed. "I don't love you anymore," I said. That seemed to hit her hard. She stared at me, shocked, trying to understand what I was saying. "You what?" she stammered. "I've fallen out of love with you, Kelly," I said, acting like I didn't remember when it happened. The truth was I knew exactly when things started to change, but I had been avoiding it. Confused, she asked, "What are you talking about?" She looked like she was about to break down, and that surprised me more than I expected. I tried to paint a picture of how things used to be between us, bringing up memories of the early days of our marriage. I reminded her of how we used to spend so much time together, sharing everything. She nodded as I spoke, her eyes showing she was caught up in the memories too. I talked about how we'd have lunch together, how we'd look forward to coming home to one another, and even the pottery classes she convinced me to take with her. I could see how much those moments meant to her as I spoke. It was never about the pottery, I said, it was about spending time with you. She told me she loved every minute of those moments, watching me, helping me, enjoying my enthusiasm for it. And she reminded me of how we'd spend hours painting those Christmas village houses we bought one year. We bought a dozen unpainted ones and worked on them together, creating a whole little holiday scene. It was tedious, but we found joy in it. Kelly even admitted that my houses always turned out better than hers, smiling as she painted the tiny shingles. Back then, I really did love her. And then there were those giant posters we worked on together, the ones you picked up on our trip to Myrtle Beach, long before adult coloring books were even a thing. We spent hours on those, using all those coloring pens. But now, just like our love, those pens have dried up. Kelly tried to defend herself, saying her love hadn't faded. But I ignored her and kept going. Our friends used to tell us how jealous they were of our relationship. We did everything together. We'd go on long walks every day, always holding hands. If I had to run some errands like picking up grass trimmer line from the hardware store, you'd tag along with me. And if you wanted to shop for clothes, I would patiently wait outside the dressing room while you tried things on. At that point, Kelly challenged me, reminding me that I didn't really enjoy going shopping with her. I explained that even if I was glued to my phone during those trips, I was still there with her. I didn't really care what you bought, I said. To me, you looked amazing in everything. I told her I could have easily stayed home watching sports, but I chose to be with her instead. We also talked about how other women in the neighborhood would get together for things like bingo or bachelorette parties, but Kelly never seemed interested. I'd rather hang out with you than the events, she said, using her old nickname for them. Thinking back, we remembered all those nights we spent curled up under the blankets, watching our favorite movie. Kelly, brushing away a tear, admitted how much she loved that film. We must have watched it 100 times, I said, and I was always happy to keep watching it with you. When I brought up the idea of divorce, Kelly quickly insisted she didn't want the marriage to end. She had pictured us growing old together, taking cooking classes, learning to ballroom dance, or even just lying in bed, reading side by side. I admitted to her that I wasn't exactly sure when things started to change between us, but I could feel the growing distance. Looking her straight in the eye, I reminded her how we used to eat out 2 or 3 times a week, but then it dwindled to once a week, mostly because of her. She had told me she didn't have time for lunch outside the office. But I knew that wasn't true. She was still having lunch, just with someone else. At some point, we stopped going to lunch together altogether, and I found myself joining my coworkers instead. I actually started to enjoy their company. Maybe a little more than I should have, I said, stretching the truth a bit. I was careful not to make Kelly feel like she was entirely to blame. I didn't want her to get defensive or for this conversation to turn into an argument. That wasn't what I was going for. Not yet. The days of us coming home early just to spend extra time together had lost their meaning. Both of us started staying late at work, and when we finally did get home, we felt miles apart, either distracted or too tired to care. Kelly asked why I never brought it up, and I admitted that she had a point, though in reality, I had tried more than once to talk about it before. I agreed with her, saying that I wished I could understand why spending time together hadn't seemed important to her anymore. I admitted that I'd often felt like I was the one failing, like I was responsible for the distance between us. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I also knew that if I jumped right into confronting her about Tom, things would blow up. She would see me as nothing but a jealous, over-controlling husband and wouldn't think about how she contributed to tearing us apart. Slowly, we just stopped doing things together. You started going to bachelorette parties, and I started spending my evenings at poker nights. You'd go to the spa on weekends, and I'd go to the golf course. Kelly and I reached a point where we could go entire days without talking about anything more than the weather or what was on the news. Even our love life had taken a dive. Whether it was being too tired or just not feeling it, there was always something getting in the way of our intimacy. I reminded her of how things used to be at the beginning of our marriage when we couldn't get enough of each other. Remember how we used to be together 4 or 5 times a week, sometimes more than once a day. I said with a grin. I reminisced about how I'd tease her while she was cooking, and we'd end up skipping dinner altogether, spending the night tangled up in each other. Things like soaking in the hot tub, which used to be part of our regular routine, hadn't happened in over a year. When Kelly hinted that I wasn't interested in being intimate anymore, I shut that down quickly, finding it absurd. It felt like she was trying to shift the blame onto me to justify her own actions. Laughing, I clarified, "Oh no, that's not it at all. I never stopped wanting intimacy. I'm just as eager now as I was 10 years ago. The truth is, I stopped wanting intimacy with you." I knew that would cut deep. She thought she had been rejecting me, but here I was, flipping the script, telling her that the lack of closeness was because I didn't desire her. Kelly, clearly stunned, asked what I meant by saying she didn't want to be intimate with me. Casually, I explained that from where I was standing, she seemed indifferent, uninterested in anything remotely fun or spontaneous. It felt like you just wanted to get it over with and move on to more interesting things like knitting. I joked, though the sting in my words was intentional. I went on to say how I'd been craving those lazy, weekend marathons of intimacy, but she didn't seem to care anymore, not even about experiencing real pleasure. I started labeling our encounters as dull, and honestly, I was just faking enjoyment during the last few times to get it over with, I confessed. Kelly objected, saying I couldn't have been faking since I'd, well, finished. I reminded her how she insisted on using protection, even though she was on birth control. I pointed out that she never actually checked, so it was easy for me to fake it. I would just hum a bit, roll off, and toss the empty condom away. The look on her face was pure shock and humiliation. I admitted my plan had worked and apologized, but my tone wasn't really sincere. To make it sting a bit more, I added, "It wasn't you. It was me." She stared at me, her face flushed, and her tears were dry now. I couldn't tell if she was angry, embarrassed, or just frustrated. Trying to ease the tension, I refilled her wine glass, and she took a big gulp. I continued, saying it was only a matter of time before one of us started looking for attention elsewhere. I wasn't talking about myself, but she didn't know that, which caught her off guard. Suddenly, Kelly's temper flared, and she demanded to know if I was cheating or if I'd fallen for someone else. I reassured her, telling her I was committed to our marriage and had no tolerance for infidelity. I reminded her of how both of us had been cheated on by our exes and how I vowed never to repeat that mistake. Realizing how unfair the accusation was, she admitted she knew deep down I wasn't capable of doing that, though guilt was written all over her face, her hands trembling slightly. Shifting the conversation, I threw in a bombshell. I told her we should wait until after the divorce before either of us started anything new, hinting at a possible new love in my life. Then, I finally revealed the big news. I had already met with my lawyer and finalized the divorce papers. "You're going to be served with divorce papers this Friday," I informed her. When she frantically asked if I was serious, I calmly confirmed it. I couldn't help but suppress a smile as I explained that it was the best thing for both of us, giving us the freedom to move on. I added that the past 10 years had been a waste of time. She argued, saying those years hadn't been a waste for her. I suggested to Kelly that deep down, she probably wanted the divorce just as much as I did. "It's pretty obvious you haven't wanted to be with me for a long time," I said. I even went as far as calling our marriage a mistake. Kelly immediately objected, insisting she didn't want a divorce and that she still loved me, that she wanted us to stay married forever. With a heavy heart, I told her the truth. I didn't love her anymore. I explained that since we were in a no-fault divorce state, we could split everything evenly without dragging ourselves through a messy legal battle, unless one of us could prove the other had cheated, which wasn't likely in our case. I suggested that we divide our finances equally and planned to go to the bank the next day. I mentioned we'd need to open new accounts, get new credit cards, transfer utilities, and put the house up for sale. I told her a realtor was scheduled to come by on Wednesday to list it. Kelly, feeling overwhelmed, tried to object, her voice shaky as she asked me to stop. Tears filled her eyes again as I calmly told her that I had already packed my things and would be staying in a hotel until I figured out a more permanent solution. "I suggest you stay in the house until it sells," I added. She yelled for me to wait, but I continued, saying there was no reason to drag this out and stressing that we needed to get everything sorted before Friday. She demanded to know why Friday was so important. I casually mentioned that Friday was the night she had planned a date with Tom, her boyfriend. I told her that was when they were planning to spend the night together at a hotel, enjoying what she probably thought would be a romantic evening. Kelly froze, her eyes wide, her mouth hanging open as she struggled to respond. I pulled out a folder with the private investigator's summary report and laid it in front of her. I flipped to the part that detailed her plans with Tom for Friday night. As she tried to speak, I cut her off and with a smirk said, "Let me guess, it's not what it looks like." I reminded her of the pictures of her and Tom kissing at lunch. She looked at me with tears streaming down her face, mumbling a quiet apology. Grinning, I said, "Funny because now I remember exactly when I stopped loving you." I told her it was the day I discovered she was setting me up to play the role of the clueless, betrayed husband, much like what had happened with my ex-wife. She stammered out another apology, desperately trying to convince me that she didn't love Tom. According to her, the whole thing was just a fling to spice up our relationship. She went on to claim that after her night with Tom, we would spend the rest of the weekend rekindling our passion. Apparently, Tom had convinced her that this little rendezvous would somehow turn me on and reignite the spark between us. I responded with pure disbelief, telling her I couldn't wrap my head around how sleeping with someone else was supposed to revive our intimacy. I asked how she thought that made any sense. She shifted gears, trying to defend herself by saying that Tom had assured her I'd be okay with it if it made her happy. I repeated, "I want you to be happy with me the way we used to be, not with someone else." I couldn't comprehend how she thought I'd ever be on board with this, especially after I had been so clear about my stance on cheating. She tried to rationalize it, saying it wouldn't technically be infidelity because she would have my permission. Firmly, I cut her off. That's never going to happen. Looking back, I couldn't believe how I had let things get this bad. I admitted that maybe I should have seen the signs and realized how boredom and loneliness had pulled us apart. I confessed that Tom's attention had somehow reignited something in her that I hadn't been able to do. When she asked how I could feel bored and lonely when we were supposedly in love, I had to admit, I don't know. But she didn't stop there. She suggested that maybe it was because I had distanced myself first, stopped having lunch with her, and stopped spending as much time together. She accused me of choosing to isolate myself, spending more time with work and friends, which left both of us lonely and vulnerable. She wouldn't believe that she had been the one to pull away. She reminded me of the times I had said I was too busy for lunch and even texted her to go without me. In her eyes, I was the one who had changed, and she thought that the fact I never brought it up meant I didn't even realize how much had shifted between us. "You were so wrapped up in your own world with Tom that you didn't even realize you were losing me," Kelly cried out, her voice shaking. She declared that she didn't want Tom, that she wanted me, and begged for us to go back to the way we used to be. Apologizing, she admitted she had messed up and that, in her frustration, she had given up on us. But I shook my head, telling her it was too late for that. Kelly pleaded, promising to quit her job, to find work somewhere else, and to never see Tom again. She swore once again that she loved me, insisting that she hadn't cheated because they hadn't slept together. She called herself a fool, saying Tom meant nothing to her, begging me not to leave. But I stood firm, telling her it's not that simple. When she tried to argue that I had stopped her before anything went too far, I cut her off. "Just because you didn't have sex doesn't mean you didn't betray me," Kelly protested, claiming that they were just friends. I fired back, "You should have been closer friends with me than anyone else." Feeling overwhelmed, Kelly dropped her head into her arms, sobbing uncontrollably, vowing never to take me for granted again. She pleaded with me, asking if we could treat this as a huge mistake and begging for forgiveness. But I wasn't about to let her off the hook that easily. "It wasn't just a mistake," I said firmly. "It was a betrayal of everything we had." She tried to insist that her heart had always belonged to me, and that giving her body to another man was something she was willing to do just to save our relationship. I reminded her that she didn't go through with it, but I questioned whether my love for her was so meaningless that she thought it wasn't worth fighting for. Kelly tearfully said that I meant everything to her and that she would do anything for me, even die for me. Her eyes widened and she screamed, grabbing my arms and begging me not to leave. Even with her apologies and desperate pleas, I stood firm. "I believe you're sorry," I said, "but that doesn't change the fact that I don't love you anymore." I told her she could find comfort with Tom now. When she revealed that Tom was married and only interested in a physical fling, I smirked and replied, "Well, I'm sure his wife will have something to say about that." I then told Kelly that both Tom's wife and I had hired the same divorce attorney. I handed her a folder filled with the investigator's report, photos of her with Tom, and details of the divorce settlement. "Take your time and read it all," I advised. Kelly begged me not to go through with it, but I didn't say another word. I stood up, grabbed my jacket, and walked out of the house, not looking back as I heard her sobbing uncontrollably behind me. Update: Kelly struggled with the divorce proceedings, and rather than drag it out with an expensive legal fight, I agreed when the judge recommended we try marriage counseling. To my surprise, the counseling worked better than I ever expected. It gave us a space to communicate openly, without judgment. Kelly finally understood how Tom's advances had almost destroyed our marriage, and I was able to express the depth of the pain and humiliation she had caused. The counselor was proud of the progress we made. After a few sessions, I moved back home, and Kelly and I found ourselves reconnecting in ways we hadn't in years. We even rekindled our passion, and Kelly was more open to my desires than she had ever been. A year later, we were back to the love we had at the beginning of our marriage. Kelly had quit her old job and joined me at my company. We commuted together, had lunch together every day. Not because we had to, but because we genuinely wanted to. We did almost everything together. We decorated a small Christmas tree, finished those old paintings we had started years ago, took another ceramics class, and even signed up for ballroom dancing lessons. To my surprise, I found an old box of coloring pens, and they weren't dried out after all. One night, as we cuddled under a blanket watching You've Got Mail, Kelly kissed me softly and said she needed to tell me something important. I saw tears welling up in her eyes, and for a moment, my heart skipped a beat in panic. Before I could even respond, Kelly blurted out, "You're going to be a daddy." I smiled, wiped away her tears, and playfully imitated Tom Hanks, saying, "Don't cry, shop girl. I love happy endings." All right, that's the end of that fun story. Now, let's move on to another exciting one. Stay tuned because this next one is going to be quite a ride. My name is Bob, and I'm a 48-year-old truck driver. Once upon a time, I thought I had a perfect marriage. But then, in an instant, everything fell apart. I lost my family, my job, and the house I had worked so hard to buy over a decade ago. Let me tell you how my wife's betrayal turned my life upside down. As a truck driver, the road became my second home. Hours spent behind the wheel blurred into one long stretch of asphalt. The scenery passed by like a distant memory, with new faces and places constantly coming and going. There were nights I'd sleep in the cab of my truck, wrapped up tight in a blanket to fight off the cold. Sometimes, traffic jams from accidents or construction held me up, but pulling into a motel for a hot shower and a Rayall bed offered some relief from the grind. Trucking's a job full of ups and downs, but it allowed me to provide for my wife, Melissa, and our daughter, Nancy. I did everything I could to be home as much as possible, but those long-haul trips meant missing out on important moments. Still, they always welcomed me back with open arms. Nancy would come running, shouting with excitement, and throw herself into my arms, telling me all about her days. Melissa would be there with a warm smile and a hot meal. Despite the distance my job created, our relationship felt stable enough, though it wasn't exactly joyful. I married Melissa when I found out she was pregnant unexpectedly. It didn't feel like I had much of a choice. She was in nursing school at the time and didn't want to drop out, so I took up trucking to support us in her education. The job kept me away from home, but I still cared for her deeply. And when Nancy was born, everything changed. My love for that little girl was something else. She brought light to my life on those long, lonely roads. Coming home wasn't just about relaxing. It was about seeing Nancy. She always greeted me first, and holding her in my arms after being away for weeks made everything worth it. We spent as much time together as we could, going to the zoo, riding carnival rides, and playing games. I would share stories about my trips, and she'd tell me all about her life. Even when I was on the road, she called me every night before bed. Knowing I was working hard for her made it easier to get through the tough days. Now, Nancy is 18 and starting college, but no matter how grown-up she seems, she'll always be my little girl. Even when I get home late, she's still there with a smile and a hug, just like when she was younger. Melissa, on the other hand, often isn't around because of her night shifts at the hospital. So, on nights when she doesn't expect me back, I slip in, take off my jacket and shoes, and head straight to the kitchen for something to eat. Nancy always warms up dinner for me, and we chat while the kettle boils. I told her all about my recent trip to Oregon, about the rugged cliffs, Crater Lake, Smith the Waterfalls, and Mount Hood. I shared my dream of taking the whole family out there for a vacation, to enjoy the beauty of nature together. Nancy didn't say much about the idea, which struck me as odd. So I asked, "How have you and your mom been without me around?" with a grin, expecting her to say how much they missed me. But instead, tears welled up in her eyes. "What's wrong?" I asked, instantly concerned. I've never been good with tears, especially not when it comes to my daughter. And then, without warning, she started sobbing, hugging me tight like she used to when she was a little girl, burying her face in my chest. "It's been rough here without you," Nancy whispers, her words catching me off guard. It turns out that while I've been out on the long, empty highways, my wife has been inviting a stranger into our home. The guy's name is Ian, and though he claims to be a coworker and just a friend, Nancy's unsettled by him. He acts inappropriately, walking around shirtless, putting his feet up on the couch like he owns the place, laughing obnoxiously, and telling crude jokes. He helps himself to whatever he wants, rummaging through my books, messing with tools in the garage, and digging through the kitchen cabinets like it's his own house. Nancy told me she's asked him to respect the place, but he just laughs it off, treating her concerns like they're a joke. His presence makes her feel unsafe in what should be her home, turning it into the domain of some unwanted guest who acts like the king of the castle whenever he shows up. Nancy has been locking herself in her room to escape him, but his loud voice and conversations with her mom still reach her. It really bothers her how her mom has suddenly stopped caring about the home we used to keep so neat, cozy, and peaceful. Things got worse when Nancy told me that this guy has been barging into her room without asking, going through her things, and asking her personal questions. He even made inappropriate comments about how she looks. Nancy tried to talk to her mom about it, asking her to stop letting him come over, but it seemed like her mom wasn't listening. Ever since Ian showed up, her mom has been focused on him and has completely neglected Nancy. As Nancy shares all of this with me, my mind races, thinking about how I'm going to restore order when I get back home. There's no way I'm going to let some guy behave like that under my roof. The thought of Melissa cheating on me with this stranger fills me with anger. I feel like breaking something or hitting something, but the fear in Nancy's eyes stops me. Instead, I decide to take a different approach. I'll catch my wife in the act and confront this guy face to face. I send Melissa a message pretending I'm delayed on the road and book a motel room just a block away. The plan's simple: if the guy comes back, Nancy will call, and I'll rush in. I didn't have to wait long. Just 2 days later, Nancy called me, and I hurried back home. My hands were trembling with tension and adrenaline as I slipped quietly through the back door, heading straight for the bedroom where I could hear voices and laughter. The moment felt like it stretched forever, but then I slammed the door open, making it crash against the wall. There they were, my wife and the lover, locked in a kiss that abruptly ended the moment I burst in. There was no mistaking it now. Melissa's affair was right in front of me. She looked stunned, like she couldn't believe I was standing there. The guy, dressed in just his pants, had the nerve to glare at me, demanding, "Who the hell are you?" As if I was the one intruding in my own home. I responded with my fist, landing it square on his face. Everything that happened next was a blur of rage. I threw punch after punch, hitting him in the face, ribs, and gut until he crumpled to the floor, knocked out cold. Breathing heavily, I turned to face Melissa, whose expression was frozen in a mix of shock and horror. "What have you done?" she whispered, her voice filled with bitterness. Tears filled my eyes as I felt a wave of betrayal and loneliness wash over me. As the shock began to fade, Melissa grabbed the phone and called for an ambulance. The minutes of waiting felt like an eternity until the sirens finally broke the silence. Paramedics rushed in and took the unconscious man out on a stretcher, and the tension between us was heavy. Sitting there in silence, I kept replaying the night in my head. What finally made me confront my wife? We had a long talk that night. She admitted that she'd felt unloved for a long time, said my constant absences for work, combined with my focus on our daughter, had left her feeling neglected. She even confessed to being jealous of the bond one shared with Nancy. She craved affection, and even though we lived under the same roof, our schedules kept us apart. She felt lonely, and Ian had given her a temporary escape from that solitude, offering companionship in the empty spaces of her life. Thankfully, his injuries weren't too serious, just a concussion, according to the doctors. After that night, Melissa and I made the decision to go our separate ways. Our marriage, which had been more of a commitment out of necessity than genuine love, had been crumbling for a while. We began the divorce process and split everything down the middle. For me, it was a hard pill to swallow. After all the years I had invested in our marriage, it never became the happy life I once hoped for. Letting go of something that had caused so much pain was hard, but I knew I had to move on, especially for Nancy's sake. Melissa moved to another city and started fresh. Eventually, she found love again and remarried. Forgiving her wasn't easy, but for our daughter's sake, I tried to keep things friendly between us. Nancy would visit her mom sometimes, but she never felt like she belonged in her mother's new family. Her true home was with me, where she knew she was really loved. Through all the challenges life threw our way, Nancy and I became closer than ever, and we found real happiness in each other's company. Second story. Hello, everyone. I have a boyfriend who lives in Canada, and we've been together for 4.5 years, with the last 2 years being long distance. He has never given me any reason to doubt his faithfulness, and we make a great gamer couple. However, when I checked my Spotify blends, I noticed a random girl in our playlist. After searching for her name, I found out that she not only lives in a city, but also goes to the same college as him. I messaged her saying, "Hey, I'm getting married to this guy next year. Please tell me if you know him." She said she didn't, and when I asked him, he also denied knowing her. I love him more than anything, but this feels strange because you can't join a blend without an invitation. I'm really confused about whether I should trust him or not, and I need some advice.